That night, a starving child knocked on the wrong door, and walked straight into the one place that would change his life forever. Because the woman who fed him had no idea she had just protected the son of the most powerful man in the city. And when that man arrived, he didn't come to say thank you. He came like a storm, ready to tear the world apart to get his boy back. But what he saw inside that small, struggling diner would stop him cold. And from that moment on, nothing in her life would ever be the same again. If stories like this touch your heart, take a second to subscribe, because this one will stay with you till the very end. It was a freezing November night in Boston. The kind of night where the wind didn't just blow, it cut through you. Rain slammed against the streets in heavy sheets, turning everything cold, empty, and unforgiving. Inside a small, worn-down diner on 4th Street, Clark Jenkins stood behind the counter, wiping it down for the 3rd time in 10 minutes. She wasn't cleaning anymore. She was thinking about unpaid bills, about the loan she couldn't keep up with, about how long she could keep this place alive. The diner wasn't just a business. It was the last thing her grandfather had left her, and letting it go felt like losing him all over again. "Storm's getting worse," Tony muttered as he pulled off his apron. "You should close early tonight." Clark forced a tired smile. "I'll be fine. Go home before you get stuck out there." Tony hesitated for a second, then nodded. "Don't stay too long, kid." The door slammed behind him, and just like that, the diner fell silent. Only the sound of rain remained. Clark leaned against the counter, staring out the window. The streetlights flickered through the storm, reflecting off puddles like broken glass. That's when she saw it. A small figure, pressed against the wall outside. At first, she thought it was just a shadow. But then it moved. Her heart dropped. Without thinking, she rushed to the door, unlocking it and pushing it open against the wind. "Hey!" she called out. "What are you doing out here?" The boy flinched. He couldn't have been older than 7. His clothes were soaked, his small body shaking violently from the cold. But something about him didn't fit. Even through the rain, she could tell. Those clothes weren't cheap. This wasn't just some lost kid. Still, none of that mattered. Clark stepped outside, kneeling down in front of him, her voice soft. "You're freezing. Come inside." The boy hesitated. His eyes were sharp, guarded, like he didn't trust the world anymore. But his body betrayed him. He was exhausted, hungry, cold. Slowly, he stepped forward. Clark guided him inside, quickly shutting the door behind them, wrapping a towel around his shoulders. "Sit here," she said gently, leading him to the booth near the heater. He didn't say a word, just sat there, gripping a small broken toy car in his hands like it was the only thing keeping him together. Clark walked back to the counter, poured him a cup of hot cocoa, and placed it in front of him. "My name's Clark," she said softly. "What's yours?" The boy stared at the cup for a long moment, then whispered, "Leo." Clark smiled faintly. "Nice to meet you, Leo." She paused. "You hungry?" He nodded. That was all she needed. Within minutes, she brought out a full plate, meatloaf, mashed potatoes, and a slice of warm cherry pie. And then she watched as he ate like someone who hadn't seen food in days. Every bite fast, desperate. Her chest tightened. No child should ever feel like this. "Where are your parents?" she asked gently. "Do you want me to call someone?" The moment the words left her mouth, everything changed. Leo froze. His hands tightened around the fork. "My mom," he said quietly. "She's in heaven." Clark's heart sank. "And your dad?" Leo didn't look up. "He's looking for me." Something about the way he said it sent a strange chill through her. "Did you get lost?" she asked carefully. He shook his head. I ran away. Clark frowned, her concern deepening. Why would you run away, sweetheart? But before he could answer, a deep, powerful engine roared outside. Then another. And another. Clark turned toward the window. 3 black luxury SUVs had just pulled up, their headlights cutting through the storm like knives. Leo's face went pale. In an instant, he slid off the booth and dropped to the floor, crawling underneath the table. "Hide me," he whispered, his voice shaking with pure fear. "Please, don't let them take me." Clark's heart started pounding. She didn't know who those people were. But she knew one thing. No child should ever be this terrified. She stepped forward, placing herself between the door and the boy hiding behind her. And then, the door exploded open. The wind rushed in first, cold, sharp, violent. Then the men followed. 4 of them. Tall, broad, dressed in dark suits that didn't belong in a place like this. They moved like they owned every inch of ground they stepped on, like they were used to people getting out of their way. Clark didn't move. Her fingers tightened slightly against the edge of the counter, but her feet stayed planted. "We're closed," she said, her voice steady despite the storm building in her chest. None of them answered. Their eyes swept across the diner, fast, precise, searching. Like hunters. One of them, a man with a scar running down his jaw, gave a small nod. 2 others immediately moved toward the back without a word. Clark stepped forward. "Hey, you can't just walk in here like that," she snapped, louder now. "I said we're closed." Still nothing. It was like she didn't exist. Her heart started pounding harder. She reached for the phone behind the counter, but before her fingers could touch it, a hand slammed down on it. Hard. The line snapped out of the wall with a sharp, brutal crack. Clark gasped, stepping back. And then the room changed. The air shifted. Because someone else had just walked in. He didn't rush. Didn't speak. He simply stepped through the doorway, and everything else seemed to fall silent around him. Tall. Controlled. Dangerous in a way that didn't need to be proven. His coat was untouched by the rain. His posture, unshaken by the chaos outside. And his eyes, cold, focused, locked directly on her. Clark felt it instantly. That instinct deep inside, the one that whispers when something isn't right. Run. But she didn't. She held her ground. "Where is he?" the man asked quietly. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It carried weight. Authority. The kind that made people listen without question. Clark swallowed, lifting her chin just slightly. "I don't know who you're talking about." The man took a slow step closer. His shoes made no sound against the floor. "You do," he said calmly. Clark shook her head. "You've got the wrong place." For a brief second, silence stretched between them. Then his gaze shifted. Not to her. To the counter. To the plate. Half-eaten food. Cherry pie crumbs. A warm mug still steaming. Clark's stomach dropped. His eyes narrowed just slightly. "You eat a lot," he said flatly. Then his gaze flicked toward the booth. The one closest to the heater. Clark's pulse spiked. "No." She stepped forward quickly, blocking his path. "There's no one." But he was already moving. Fast. In 2 steps, he was past her. Clark reacted without thinking. She grabbed his arm, trying to stop him. "Stop." The second her hand touched him, everything froze. The men behind him stiffened instantly. Like the entire room had just crossed a line no one dared to cross. The man slowly looked down, at her hand gripping his sleeve. Then back at her. Something flickered in his eyes. Not anger. Not yet. Surprise. No one touched him. No one dared. And yet here she was, a tired waitress in a worn apron, standing in his way. "You're not taking him," Clark said, her voice shaking but firm. The man's expression hardened. "Move." "No." The word came out before she could stop it. And this time, it carried something else. Fear, mixed with something stronger. Protectiveness. "He's scared of you," she added, her voice breaking slightly. That did it. Something dark passed through the man's eyes. Behind him, one of the men shifted, reaching inside his jacket. The tension snapped tight, ready to explode. And then, a small voice cut through the silence. "Leave her alone." Clark's breath caught. The man froze. Slowly, Leo crawled out from under the table. His small fists were clenched. His eyes, filled with fear, but also something else. Defiance. He stepped forward, placing himself between Clark and the man. The contrast was unreal. A tiny boy, standing in front of a man who looked like he could break the world in half. For a moment, no one moved. Then the man's entire expression changed. Just like that. The cold, the control, the danger. It cracked. He dropped to one knee. Right there, on the diner floor. "Leo." His voice wasn't the same anymore. It wasn't cold. It wasn't commanding. It was something else entirely. Raw. Shaken. "You have any idea what you've done?" he said, his hands gripping the boy's shoulders. "Do you know what could have happened to you?" Leo looked away. "I don't care." The words were quiet, but heavy. "I hate that house," he whispered. "I hate the guards. I hate everything." The man's jaw tightened. "I want my mom." That one sentence. It hit harder than anything else in the room. Clark felt it in her chest. The silence that followed wasn't tense anymore. It was painful. Real. The man pulled Leo into his arms. Tight. Like he was holding onto something he almost lost. For a second, Leo resisted. Then slowly, he melted into him, burying his face in his father's shoulder. Clark stood there, watching. Her heart pounding, but something inside her shifting. This wasn't just a dangerous man. This was a father. A broken one. After a moment, the man stood up again, lifting Leo effortlessly. The softness in his face disappeared almost instantly. The mask returned. But not completely. Because when he looked at Clark this time, there was something different in his eyes. Not just cold calculation. Something else. Respect. Curiosity. He nodded slightly to one of his men. A thick stack of cash hit the counter. "For the food," he said calmly. "And for keeping him safe." Clark didn't even look at it. "I don't want your money." The man paused, then turned back toward her slowly. His gaze lingered on her face for a second longer than before. "Keep it," he said quietly. "You'll need it." And with that, he turned toward the door. The men followed. The storm swallowed them again. And just like that, they were gone. The diner fell silent. Clark stood there, staring at the door. Then slowly, her eyes dropped to the stack of cash on the counter. Her hands trembled slightly. Something told her. This wasn't over. Not even close. Clark didn't move for a long time. The storm outside kept raging, but inside the diner, everything felt strangely still. Her eyes stayed locked on the door where they had just disappeared, as if expecting it to burst open again at any second. But it didn't. Slowly, her gaze dropped. The money was still there. A thick stack. Clean. Crisp. Real. More money than she had seen in months, maybe years. Her fingers twitched slightly, but she didn't reach for it. Instead, she stepped back, like it might burn her if she got too close. "What did you just get yourself into?" she whispered under her breath. The question didn't have an answer, and that was what scared her the most. That night, she barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the same thing. Leo's terrified face under that table, and the way that man's expression had shattered the moment he saw his son. It didn't make sense. A man that dangerous, that powerful, shouldn't have looked that human. But he did, and somehow that made it worse. By morning, the storm had passed, but the heaviness inside her chest hadn't. She opened the diner early, like always. Routine was the only thing keeping her grounded. Coffee brewing. Grill heating up. Same cracked counter. Same worn stools. Like nothing had changed. But everything had. Tony walked in around 9, shaking rainwater off his coat. "You stayed late again?" he muttered, heading straight for the kitchen. Clark hesitated for a second. "Yeah, something like that." He glanced at her briefly, then frowned. "You look like hell." "Thanks," she said dryly. Tony shrugged. "Just saying." She forced a small smile and turned away. She didn't tell him. Couldn't. Some things, you just knew were bigger than you. And talking about them wouldn't make them smaller. The lunch rush came and went like it always did. A few regulars. A couple of new faces. Nothing unusual. Nothing that hinted at the chaos waiting just around the corner. By late afternoon, the diner had quieted down again. Clark was wiping down a table when the bell above the door chimed. She didn't look up right away. "We're switching to dinner soon," she called out casually. "Give me a minute." A voice answered back. Slow. Smooth. Cold. "Take your time, sweetheart." Clark froze. That voice. She knew it. Not from last night. From something older. Something worse. She slowly turned around. And there he was. Carmine. Leaning casually in the middle of her diner like he owned it. 2 men stood behind him. Bigger. Meaner. The kind of men who didn't ask questions. Just followed orders. Clark felt her stomach drop. Not him. Not today. "Carmine," she said, forcing her voice to stay steady. "I told you, I just need more time." He smiled. But there was nothing friendly about it. "You've been needing more time for a while now, Clark." He walked forward slowly, running his hand along the back of a chair. "You think my boss likes waiting?" Clark swallowed hard. "I'm working on it. Things have been tight." "Tight?" He laughed softly. "That's one way to say it." Then suddenly, crack. One of his men grabbed a chair and slammed it hard against the counter. Wood splintered. The sound echoed through the diner like a gunshot. Clark flinched, her heart jumping into her throat. "Stop," she snapped. "What are you doing?" Carmine tilted his head slightly, watching her. "Sending a message." Her hands clenched into fists. "I'll get you the money." Her mind raced. The money from last night. She hated even thinking about it. But right now, it might be the only thing standing between her and disaster. "I have 5,000, she said quickly. "I can bring it today." Carmine's smile widened. 5,000. He stepped closer. "That's just interest, sweetheart." The words hit like a punch. Clark's chest tightened. "Then I'll get the rest. Just give me time." But Carmine wasn't listening anymore. His eyes had changed. Darkened. Predatory. He reached out, grabbing a strand of her hair, twirling it slowly between his fingers. "Or," he said softly, leaning closer, "we can work something else out." Clark's entire body went rigid. Disgust burned through her. She slapped his hand away instantly. "Don't touch me." The room went still. For a split second, everything froze. Then Carmine's face twisted. "You got some nerve," he muttered. His hand curled into a fist. Clark saw it coming. She didn't move, didn't step back, but her eyes shut tight, bracing, waiting. The hit never came. Instead, a sharp crack echoed through the diner, followed by a heavy thud. Clark's eyes snapped open. Carmine was on the floor, blood pouring from his nose, groaning in pain, and standing over him was a man in a black suit. One of them. From last night. Clark's breath caught before the other two men could react. More figures entered. Fast, silent, precise. Within seconds, both of Carmine's men were on their knees, arms pinned behind their backs. Helpless. The entire diner had been taken over. Just like that. Clark stood frozen, her mind struggling to catch up. And then, the door opened again. Slowly this time. Deliberately. He stepped inside. No coat now. Just a sharp-fitted suit that made him look even more dangerous somehow. His presence filled the room instantly. Heavy. Commanding. Unavoidable. His eyes found hers right away. And didn't leave. He walked forward, stepping past Carmine like he wasn't even there. Like he was nothing. Then he stopped in front of her, close enough that she could feel the shift in the air between them. "Are you hurt?" he asked. His voice was low, but different from last night. Softer. Clark blinked, caught off guard. "No, I'm fine." But her voice wasn't as steady anymore. Because this time, she wasn't just afraid of him. She understood what he was. And that made everything more dangerous. Behind him, Carmine let out a weak groan. The man didn't even look back. Instead, his gaze stayed locked on Clark. Waiting. Watching. Like she was the only thing in the room that mattered. And for the first time, Clark felt something she didn't expect. Not fear. Not exactly. Something deeper. Something far more complicated. And it unsettled her more than anything else. Clark didn't answer right away. His question still hung in the air between them, quiet, but heavy. "Are you hurt?" It wasn't just the words. It was the way he said them. Like it actually mattered. "I said I'm fine," she replied softly, her voice steadier now, though her heart was still racing. For a moment, he didn't move. Didn't blink. Just studied her. Like he was trying to read something deeper than her words. Then slowly, his gaze shifted. Down. To the broken chair. The splintered wood. The mess Carmine had made of her place. A shadow passed over his face. Dark. Controlled. Dangerous. He turned slightly, finally acknowledging the man still groaning on the floor. "Who does he work for?" he asked calmly. The man behind him, the one who had stepped in first, answered immediately. "Local crew. Low level. Been circling this block for months." Clark's stomach tightened. Months. So this hadn't just started. She'd been watched, pressured, pushed slowly to the edge. And she hadn't even realized how deep it went. He nodded once, as if confirming something in his own mind. Then he looked down at Carmine. Really looked at him this time. Not with anger. Not with emotion. Just judgment. Cold. Final. Carmine tried to push himself up, coughing, blood running down his face. "You don't know who you're messing with." The words barely left his mouth before one of the suited men forced him back down. Silence followed. Thick. Suffocating. Then the man standing in front of Clark spoke again. "Make sure his boss understands," he said quietly. This place is no longer part of their world. The words were simple, but they carried weight. The kind of weight that didn't need explaining. The man behind him nodded. Understood. Clark's breath caught slightly. This place, no longer part of their world. Just like that. Like her life had been redrawn without her permission. The men moved quickly, dragging Carmine and the others out of the diner. No shouting. No chaos. Just controlled, practiced efficiency. Within seconds, they were gone. Again. Leaving behind silence. And him. Clark let out a slow breath she didn't realize she had been holding. Then she looked at him. Really looked this time. You didn't have to do that, she said quietly. Her voice wasn't ungrateful. But it wasn't comfortable either. It was conflicted. I could have handled it. He raised an eyebrow slightly. He was about to hit you. The way he said it, simple. Matter of fact. Like that alone justified everything. Clark shook her head faintly. That doesn't mean. It does. The interruption was calm, but firm. Final. She fell silent. Because part of her knew. He wasn't wrong. But that didn't make it right either. He reached into his jacket, pulling out a slim envelope, and placed it on the counter in front of her. Clark glanced down at it, then back up at him. What's that? Your problem, he replied. Her brows pulled together. She opened the envelope slowly. Inside, documents. Numbers. Signatures. Her breath caught as she read. The debt. Gone. Every dollar. Cleared. Her fingers trembled slightly as she lowered the papers. You paid it. Yes. Just one word. Like it meant nothing. But to her, it meant everything. Years of stress. Sleepless nights. Fear. All wiped away. In a single moment. Why? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He didn't answer right away. Instead, his eyes drifted briefly across the diner. The worn walls. The old counter. The place she had been fighting so hard to hold on to. Then his gaze returned to her. My son hasn't eaten since that night, he said quietly. Clark froze. He hasn't spoken. Barely leaves his room. Something inside her chest tightened instantly. Leo. The image of him, sitting there, small and quiet, clutching that broken toy. It hit her harder than she expected. The only thing he asked for, he continued, his voice lowering slightly, was you. The words settled between them. Soft, but powerful. Clark looked away for a second, trying to process it. That doesn't make sense, she murmured. It does, he said. She looked back at him. He trusts you. Simple. Direct. But there was something else behind it. Something heavier. Something almost reluctant. I don't trust people, he added quietly. Not easily. Clark felt the shift again. That glimpse beneath the surface. The man behind the power. But he does, he continued. And right now, that's enough. Silence filled the space between them again. Different this time. Less threatening. More uncertain. I'm not a nanny, Clark said after a moment. Her voice was calm, but firm. I run this place. This is my life. He studied her for a second longer. Then nodded slightly. I'm not asking you to give it up. Clark frowned. Then what are you asking? He took a small step closer. Not threatening. Not aggressive. But close enough that she could feel the quiet intensity in his presence. I'm asking you to help my son. Her breath slowed. To come to my home, he continued. Cook for him. Be there. Clark blinked, caught off guard. That's not normal, she said, almost under her breath. A faint, almost invisible shift touched his expression. "No," he agreed. "It's not." There was no denial in his voice. No attempt to soften it. Just truth. "I can pay you more than this place will ever make," he added. The words landed hard. Not because of greed, but because of reality. Because he wasn't wrong. Clark looked around the diner again. At everything she had fought for. Everything she was still trying to hold together. Then she looked back at him. "And if I say no?" For the first time, he stepped back, giving her space, giving her a choice. "Then I walk away," he said calmly. "No threats, no pressure, just certainty. But my son will still be waiting," he added quietly. And that was the part that stayed with her. Not the money, not the power, but the image of a little boy, sitting alone, waiting. He turned toward the door, reaching for it, then paused. Without looking back, he spoke again. "I'll send a car in the morning." The door opened. Cold air slipped inside. "Be ready, if you choose to come." And then he was gone. Clark stood there, unmoving, the envelope still in her hands. Her heart caught somewhere between two worlds. The one she knew, and the one she had just been invited into. And for the first time, she realized, either choice would change her life forever. Clark didn't move even after the door closed. The cold air lingered for a second, then slowly faded. But the weight he left behind didn't. It stayed, heavy, quiet, sitting right in the middle of her chest. She looked down at the envelope again, still clutched in her hands. Then around the diner. The cracked counter. The worn booths. The flickering neon light outside the window. This place had never felt small to her before. It had always been enough. But now, it felt fragile, like something that could disappear overnight. Her fingers tightened slightly around the envelope. Not because of the money, but because of what it represented. A way out. Or maybe a step into something she didn't understand. That night, she stayed late again. Not working. Just sitting. Thinking. The diner was quiet. Too quiet. Every little sound echoed louder than it should. And in that silence, her thoughts kept drifting back to the same thing. Leo. The way he had looked at her. Like she was safe. Like she was something steady in a world that wasn't. She closed her eyes for a moment. A memory slipped in. Her grandfather, standing behind this very counter. Smiling. Tired. Kind. "People don't always need money, kid," he used to say. "Sometimes they just need someone who shows up." Clark let out a slow breath. "Yeah," she whispered. "But what if showing up changes everything?" There was no answer. Just silence. By the time she locked up and went home, the sky had cleared. But her mind hadn't. She barely slept. The decision kept circling back again and again. Stay here. Fight. Struggle. Survive. Or go there. Step into something unknown. Dangerous, but maybe meaningful. At exactly 8 in the morning, the answer came to her. Not in words. In a feeling. A quiet kind of certainty. Because she knew one thing for sure. She couldn't ignore that little boy. Not after what she had seen. Not after what she had felt. When she stepped outside, the car was already there. Sleek. Black. Out of place on her street. Like it didn't belong in a world like hers. The driver stood beside it, waiting. Clark hesitated for a second. Her small duffel bag felt heavier than it should. Not because of what was inside, but because of what it meant. Everything she knew, packed into one bag. She looked back at the building behind her. The diner wasn't in sight from here, but she could still feel it. Like a part of her was still standing inside it. "Miss Jenkins?" The driver's voice broke through her thoughts. She nodded once. "Yeah." He opened the door for her. Clark took a breath and stepped forward. The moment she sat inside, the door closed with a quiet, final sound. And just like that, there was no turning back. The ride was long. Long enough for her thoughts to settle, and then rise again. The city slowly faded behind them. Concrete turned into trees. Noise turned into silence. And the farther they went, the more she realized how far she was stepping away from everything she knew. She didn't ask questions. Didn't speak. She just watched the world change outside the window. Until finally, the car slowed. Massive gates stood ahead. Tall, solid, uninviting. They opened without a word. And the car moved through. Clark leaned forward slightly, her breath catching without her realizing it. This wasn't just a house. It was something else entirely. Large, cold, perfect, like a place built to keep the world out, and everything inside locked in. The car came to a stop. The driver stepped out, opening her door again. Clark hesitated for just a second longer this time, then stepped out. The air felt different here. Cleaner, but heavier somehow, like it carried secrets. The front doors opened before she even reached them. And the moment she stepped inside, the warmth didn't greet her. The silence did. It was beautiful. Impressive. But it didn't feel like a home. It felt like a place where people lived, without really living. Her footsteps echoed softly as she walked forward. Every detail perfect. Every surface untouched. And yet, something was missing. Something human. "Clark." The voice came fast. Soft, but filled with emotion. She barely had time to react before Leo ran straight into her, wrapping his arms tightly around her waist. Clark dropped her bag instantly, kneeling down and pulling him into a hug. And just like that, everything else faded. "Hey," she whispered, brushing his hair back gently. "You came," he said, his voice small, but full of relief. Clark smiled softly, even though her chest tightened. "Of course I did." Leo pulled back slightly, looking at her like he needed to make sure she was real. "You're not leaving, right?" The question hit deeper than it should have. Clark hesitated. Just for a second. Then she nodded. "I'm here." And she meant it. At least in that moment. A presence shifted in the room. Clark felt it before she saw it. She looked up. He was standing there. Watching. Quiet. Still. Like he had been there the whole time. His eyes moved from Leo to her. And something in his expression changed. Subtle, but real. "You came," he said. The same words, but spoken differently. Clark stood up slowly, brushing her hands against her jeans. "I said I would." A brief silence followed. Then he nodded once. "Good." Simple. But there was something behind it. Something unspoken. Leo tightened his grip on her hand slightly. And Clark felt it. That connection. That responsibility. That invisible thread tying her to this place now. She glanced around again. At the size of it. The distance. The quiet. Then back at him. "You said I'd be helping him," she said calmly. "I didn't realize that meant living here." His gaze didn't waver. "It's the only way this works." Clark held his eyes for a moment. Not backing down. Not intimidated. Just steady. "Then we do this my way too," she said quietly. A small pause. Something flickered in his expression. Interest. Meaning. Clark glanced down at Leo, then back at him. "He's not just someone to manage," she said. "He's a kid. He needs normal. He needs warmth. Not just security." The words hung in the air. Honest. Direct. For a second, nothing moved. Then slowly, a faint shift touched his face. Not a smile, but close. "Then bring it," he said. Clark felt her breath steady. And in that moment, without realizing it, she stepped fully into his world. Clark didn't realize how quiet the house truly was, until she started walking through it. Not the kind of quiet that feels peaceful. The kind that feels watched, measured. Every step she took echoed softly against polished floors that probably cost more than her entire diner. Leo held onto her hand like he was afraid she might disappear if he let go. She didn't pull away, didn't rush him. She slowed her pace instead, matching his small steps, letting him guide her without even knowing he was doing it. "Have you eaten today?" she asked gently. Leo shook his head. "I wasn't hungry." Clark didn't call him out on it. She knew that wasn't the truth. Hunger wasn't always about food. Sometimes it was about feeling safe enough to eat. She glanced toward the man walking a few steps behind them. He hadn't said anything since they entered, but she could feel him there. Constant. Present. Watching everything. "Then let's fix that," she said softly, squeezing Leo's hand. She followed the direction she had been given earlier, finding the kitchen without asking. And when she stepped inside, she paused. It was perfect. Spotless. Every surface gleaming. Every tool in place. But it didn't feel like a kitchen. It felt like a showroom. Unused. Untouched. No warmth. No life. Clark walked slowly to the center, setting her bag down. Leo climbed onto one of the high stools, watching her quietly. "All right," she said, tying her hair back with a loose band. "Let's see what we've got." She opened the fridge. And for a second, she just stared. Everything was there. Expensive cuts of meat. Fresh produce. Imported ingredients she had only seen on cooking shows. But nothing felt chosen. It was all just there. Like someone had filled the space without knowing what it was meant for. Clark let out a soft breath. "Okay," she murmured. "We're starting simple." She pulled out eggs, butter, bread. Basic. Familiar. Safe. Leo watched her carefully, his eyes following every movement. "You don't have cooks?" she asked without looking back. There was a pause behind her. Then his voice came. "We do." Clark glanced over her shoulder. "Then why isn't he eating?" Silence. Not uncomfortable. Just honest. She turned back to the counter, cracking the eggs into a bowl. "They probably cook like this place looks," she added quietly. "Perfect, but cold." No response came this time. But she felt it. That shift again. Like her words had landed somewhere deeper than expected. She melted butter in the pan, the soft sizzle filling the room. For the first time since she walked in, the kitchen sounded alive. Leo leaned forward slightly, watching the movement. "What are you making?" he asked. Clark smiled faintly. "Something real." She kept it simple. Scrambled eggs. Toast. Warm. Soft. The kind of food that didn't try to impress. Just comfort. She placed the plate in front of him. "Try it." Leo hesitated for a second. Then slowly, he picked up the fork. Clark didn't watch him directly. She gave him space. Pretended to focus on wiping the counter. But out of the corner of her eye, she saw it. The first bite. Then another. Then another. Slow at first, then steady. And just like that, something shifted. The tension in his small shoulders eased. His grip on the fork relaxed. Clark felt it in her chest. A quiet kind of relief. Not loud, but real. She turned slightly, leaning against the counter. "That's better," she said softly. Leo didn't answer. But he didn't stop eating either. Behind them, the man hadn't moved. Still standing. Still watching. Clark glanced at him again. And this time, she didn't look away quickly. She held his gaze. Just for a moment. There was something different in his eyes now. Not just control. Not just authority. Something softer. Buried, but there. He stepped forward slowly. Not into the space. But closer to it. "Thank you," he said quietly. Clark blinked. It wasn't the words. It was how rare they sounded coming from him. She nodded once. "You don't need to thank me." He looked at Leo, then back at her. "I do." Clark didn't respond. Because she didn't know what to say to that. Instead, she turned back to the counter, picking up a towel. Keeping her hands busy. Keeping things normal. "You can't fix everything with money," she said after a moment. The words came out softer than she expected. But they stayed in the air. He didn't argue. Didn't defend himself. He just listened. "He doesn't need everything," she continued quietly. "He just needs someone who shows up and stays." Silence followed. Longer this time. Then, "I'm trying." The words were low. Rough. Not polished. Not controlled. Real. Clark turned slightly, surprised. Because for the first time, he didn't sound like the most powerful man in the city. He sounded like a father, who didn't know how to fix what was broken. Leo finished his plate, setting the fork down quietly. Clark walked over, brushing a small crumb from his cheek. "You did good," she said softly. He looked up at her. Not scared anymore. Not distant. Just present. "Are you staying?" he asked again. Clark paused. Then nodded. "Yeah, I'm staying." Leo leaned into her slightly. And for a second, it felt simple. Like everything made sense. But behind that moment, something else was building. Something quiet. Something unseen. And as Clark lifted her eyes again, she noticed it. The way one of the men near the doorway shifted slightly. The way his gaze moved, not toward them, but toward something outside. Subtle, but wrong. And for the first time since she stepped into this house, Clark felt it again. That same instinct from the night in the diner. Something wasn't right. Clark's eyes stayed fixed on the man by the doorway. It was subtle. Most people wouldn't have noticed it. But she had learned something already in this house. Nothing here moved without reason. And that movement wasn't right. "Is something wrong?" she asked quietly. The question shifted the air. The man near the doorway stiffened just slightly, then looked away. Too quickly. Clark felt it again. That same cold feeling from the night Leo hid under the table. The same warning in her chest. Behind her, Leo's small hand tightened around her fingers. He felt it too. The man stepped forward, trying to keep his voice steady. "Everything's fine." But it wasn't. Clark turned slowly toward him, her eyes sharp now. "No," she said calmly. "It's not." The room fell silent. Then, the sound came. Distant at first. Engines. More than one. Approaching fast. The man at the door reacted instantly this time, reaching toward his earpiece. "Sir." Clark turned toward him. She didn't need an explanation. She already understood. Something had followed her here. Or maybe, something had been waiting all along. The man stepped forward immediately, his entire presence shifting in an instant. Cold. controlled, deadly. Take him, he said, his voice low but firm. Clark didn't argue. She bent down, pulling Leo close, her arms wrapping around him protectively. It's okay, she whispered. Stay with me. Leo nodded, pressing into her. The calm they had just created was already breaking. Footsteps echoed through the halls now. Fast. Coordinated. The house wasn't silent anymore. It was alive. Moving. Preparing. Clark's heart pounded hard in her chest. Not for herself. For him. She tightened her hold on Leo. You're not going anywhere, she murmured. The doors at the far end opened. Men rushed in. Voices low. Urgent. And in that moment, the truth revealed itself. This world was never going to let them have something simple. The man stepped closer to Clark, his eyes locking onto hers. There was no fear in them. Only decision. Stay behind me. Clark shook her head. No. It came out instantly. Without hesitation. He paused. Just for a second. You don't understand. I do, she said quietly. Her voice didn't rise. Didn't break. But it held something stronger than fear. I'm not leaving him. Leo looked up at her, his eyes wide, but steady. She placed a hand gently on his cheek. And in that moment, everything became clear. Not the danger. Not the fear. But the truth. That this wasn't about power. Or wealth. Or control. This was about a child, who needed someone to stand between him and the world. The man watched her closely. And something shifted again. Not surprise this time. Understanding. He turned slightly, speaking to the men behind him. Lock everything down. They moved instantly. The house sealed itself like a fortress. Clark stayed where she was, holding Leo, standing her ground. Because she wasn't just a waitress anymore. She wasn't just someone passing through. She had chosen this. Chosen him. And there was no turning back from that kind of choice. Minutes passed. Heavy. Slow. Until finally, the noise outside faded. The tension eased, just enough to breathe again. One of the men stepped forward. It's handled. Silence followed. Then, everything began to settle. The house returned to its stillness. But it wasn't the same anymore. Because something had changed inside it. Clark slowly loosened her grip, looking down at Leo. You okay? He nodded. Then wrapped his arms around her again. Tighter this time. Like he knew. She wasn't going anywhere. The man stood there for a moment, watching them. And for the first time, he didn't look like a man carrying the weight of an empire. He looked like someone who had finally found something he couldn't buy. Something real. He stepped closer. Not as a threat. Not as a command. Just closer. I built all of this, he said quietly. Clark looked at him. He glanced around the room. The walls. The space. The power. And still, it wasn't enough. His voice lowered slightly. I couldn't protect what mattered most. Clark didn't interrupt. Didn't try to fix it. She just listened. Because sometimes, that's all people needed. He looked at Leo. Then back at her. And then you walked into his life, with nothing. Clark shook her head faintly. I didn't have nothing, she said softly. She placed a hand over Leo's shoulder. I had something real. The words settled between them. Simple. But undeniable. And in that moment, the truth became clear to all of them. That love didn't come from power. Didn't come from money. It came from showing up. From staying. From choosing someone, even when it was hard. Clark looked at Leo again, brushing his hair back gently. "You're safe," she whispered. And this time, it wasn't just a promise. It was a reality they had fought for. The man took a slow breath, then nodded. Not as a boss, not as someone in control, but as someone who finally understood that no amount of wealth could replace the warmth of a single act of kindness, and that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is let someone in. Clark stood there, holding Leo, feeling the quiet settle around them. Not empty anymore, not cold, but filled with something new, something alive, hope. And in that moment, for the first time since that stormy night, everything felt right. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to subscribe, and tell me in the comments which part of the world you're watching from.